Hey, welcome back. We'll be a little bit more serious today. If you're driving along every once in a while and you listen to the radio, listen to music, you hear this annoying sound comes over, and then it's followed by a message that says, if this had been a real emergency, you would have been told what to do and all these various things. Now, most of us never get to the end of that annoying sound because we've already changed the channels or what have you. But that's the general gist of it. And I don't want you to, if you're just just listening to this and hearing me suggest something, don't jump to conclusions, because I'm not suggesting that there is no serious situation that we're involved in at this point. I just kind of want to use an illustration. And want to think about the fact that emergencies are relative. So there are emergencies, but then an emergency can trump a different emergency. So think about this. Think about what you were doing Saturday at about 5 o'clock. So that would have been the 28th. Saturday, March 28th. What were you doing at 5 o'clock p.m.? Now, I can tell you probably what you were doing. You were in your house, and you were probably trying to figure out a way not to be bored. Maybe you had Saturday night, you were watching a movie with your family, or you're at various places within your home doing whatever you were doing. And but there's just this underlying thought that goes through our mind now. It's the conversation whenever we go out. It's what you talk about. It's just what pops up first on our mind. And so you were probably doing or thinking something, or trying to avoid thinking about Mr. 19. And to illustrate the nature of emergencies, being confined to your home is kind of an emergency and various things. But I want to tell a little bit of a story of a visitor we had to church about a month ago. And she was in the area, or is from the area, and has decided to eventually she's going to come with us to church when she's physically capable. But she texted me and she said, I have to go to a funeral. So she and her daughter were making plans to travel to a funeral. That's where they were on 10 o'clock in the morning at this funeral. Now, because of everything going on, the funeral was limited to 10 people. Since it was for her stepmother, the biological children came first, and she was not allowed to go to, even though she was extremely, extremely close. She was raised by this woman. She was not allowed to go. So that was a little disappointing. That's not really the story, however. There's more to this story. In November, she had traveled to the same town to bury her stepsister's daughter. And again, this is a close-knit step family. This is not a distant, we don't like each other step family. So essentially her niece is who she had buried in November, a tragic accident. And there's a lot going on. But that's not even really the full story here. More than that, she'll never remember really a lot of what's going on, and it's hard to believe that a lot. There's people right now that couldn't care less about what's going on with this virus going around. But she will not remember 2020 as the year that she was stuck inside for some time. She will remember March 28th at 5 a.m. because she was in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And at 5 o'clock, while you were free to move about your house, she was hiding out, much like you were, but she was hiding out in her bathroom while a Category 3 tornado ripped through Jonesboro, Arkansas. Her niece, the sister of the girl who had passed away in November, had her home wiped out in this tornado. Everyone's safe. No one died in this tornado, luckily enough. They managed to get the kids. Her niece's kids were managed to get out to a different safe place, and she stayed in the home. But all of a sudden, we see that emergencies are pretty relative. You were trying not to be bored, and she was praying to be alive in that terrifying moment. There's a story similarly to this in, well, maybe not exactly similar, but that reminds me of this in the book of Matthew in chapter 14. And as we progress through Matthew, there's little references to John the Baptist, and he's in prison, and he's sending messages to Jesus and wanting to know, and finally, in chapter 14, he's beheaded by Herod, and the news comes to Jesus, and Jesus decides, I've got to leave, and I just have to get away for a little bit. So Jesus goes out to the wilderness or woods or whatever his favorite place to go was, to be alone and pray. And the multitudes come to him. And this is a tragic thing. We think of funerals and we think, oh, that's a tragic thing, and yet everything is relative. And Jesus sees a more relative thing, a more relative emergency than his tragic loss of his own cousin. He sees people, and he says they're like sheep having no shepherd. They're just lost, and he has compassion on them. It says, and so he leaves his own situation and he goes to minister to these people because he realized that there was something more urgent even than his own particular situation. And so I hope that there's a little bit of a shorter one, but I hope that its seriousness impacts you, that there are things more serious than what we're going through, to look around and be open to the fact that in any situation, whether we're in this or a year or two down the road, 10 years from now, the majority of us are not going to be thinking about this. We might think back and, oh yeah, 10 years, at the 10-year anniversary, 25 years ago, do you remember this thing in the news? And oh yeah, maybe for some people there will be impact that is long-term impact if there are people who've lost a loved one or whatever. But for the most of us, I'm probably not going to be impacted by this. The chances are against it. Financially, certainly. I'm in the prime of my health. I'm probably not going to be impacted. But for those of us, even who are impacted to a certain degree, as we look back on this, to be aware of the fact that other people are impacted more by things, and to understand at the bottom of it, even our physical loss is a certain measure of emergency and tragedy, but the spiritual losses and tragedies are far more important, or should be, certainly as Christ evaluates things. Spiritual tragedies are the worst, and they trump even our own losses in life. So, all right, well, see you again tomorrow.